I've said this before. If you pick up a book and you want to know the quality of the book, look at the chapter ends and the chapter starts. If a writer is not going to end on a high note and begin on a note that grips you, I mean, even you could have even a good solid book that's mediocre, except if the chapter beginnings and ends that tie things together are really good, the book itself is going to be good. I do it throughout it all, but I always make sure to have something that's going to say, oh, I got to read where we go from here. And when we start a chapter, say, oh, I got this. There's an image. There's something that you are giving out to other people, and it is incumbent upon the artist to recognize that art is, in its lowest form, entertainment. You have to keep people engaged. If you want to give people the medicine, you have to give them a little sugar, and that's the sugar that gets to people.
Right. Sorry, where were we?
We were ending on I was talking about chapters and beginnings and the need to have them good.
Chapters and beginnings. Right, yes. You know, that's a side note. That's actually something that's very interesting to me. Maybe a lot of writers do it, but I really like to see the title, the first word, the first paragraph. And now that you mentioned it, I guess how someone ends their chapters are actually very important too. I don't know. Those are all the notes I have from Vincetti Brothers. Can I know it's a 1,000-page book, and there's other things that will come to me tomorrow to ask you about. But I just began Norwegian in the Family, Norwegian in the Family, and I gotta say it's pretty fucking cool so far. I got to where am I at? I'm at the first chapter with Tony Left, which I'm glad you brought him back. I'm glad he's back. He was a funny guy, you know, messed up. He's fucked up. He's a cool contrast to the Norwegian. He was like, you know, the perfect killer.
Tony Luft is a dumbass. I mean, in this book, the Vincetti Brothers, there's a scene where he's following Gino, and yet his head is so big, he's hiding behind a little tree, trying to hide from him. And I got that from Charlie Brown cartoons, where Charlie Brown is sometimes hiding behind trees, yet his head is so big. But there is a good scene where this is also based upon a reality, and I wrote a play about this. And I also there was, if you have read True Life.
Yes.
So if you remember in True Life, there's the scene about the guy who wanted to kidnap and rape this girl that he and I worked with.
Yes.
And so that's the same basis of the scene where there's the guy who's captured, and he's in the sub basement of this abandoned building that I think I call him the Voice or something like that in this book. And so that's basically the same character, just in a different state. And Gino stumbles upon him, and Tony Luft is out there waiting to kill him, and he fucks it up, and Gino escapes or whatnot. And we don't really know why Luft is after him, or maybe I give a cursory reason, like maybe, I don't know, does Tony Belleguardo send him after Gino because they want to silence Gino? Yeah, because they want to silence Gino for the Massapequa massacre scene. Let me ask you a few questions though. I mentioned, and speaking of spiders, so I mentioned how I took the rape scene where Gino rapes the ex-girlfriend of Aldo. I describe it very Cindy McGee. I describe Gino sort of like a spider just on top of her and preying upon her. And one of the things I said is the most important thing, because this book is divided into 4 different types of chapters: the numbered chapters, the Aldo, the Gino, and the Dino chapters. And the rape of Cindy McGee does not take place in a Gino chapter. It takes place in an Aldo chapter. And the reason I did that was the most important thing is not that Gino is raping Cindy, but that Aldo is looking through a keyhole, watching his brother rape his girlfriend, and doesn't intercede until the very end. What did you think about that?
That whole scene is going to be forever burned into my memory. That's the moment, because up to that point I was thinking, maybe there's something good about Gino. Maybe there's something really good. Besides when he finds the puppy and he cares for a little bit. At that moment, everything just died inside of me. Yeah, but watching as I slowly started reading it, I realized that wait, Aldo, what are you doing, buddy? Are you going to do anything about it? And he does eventually fight Gino. They eventually have that brawl and everything, but it's very it's very detailed, going into like how he becomes a spider and he's just crazy. He's like ripping her clothes off and she's screaming, and Aldo's still not doing anything. And even though you mentioned that like this is only a few moments passing, I still got a very distinct impression that he was I don't know, a pussy. He just couldn't move.
So this quartet, this I call the New York Quartet. I also call the 4M Quartet. The first book, Tumbleweeds, I called a novel of moods, and this book is called a novel of minds. The Norwegian in the Family book is called a novel of men, and then the final book, 64, is a novel of memories. So since you completed the first two books, a novel of moods, which is Tumbleweeds, and this book, a novel of minds, the Vincetti brothers, do those subtitles mean anything to you? And if so, what and why?
As far as tumbleweeds go, we start tumbleweeds, start chronologically. I thought about the 4M. I thought about the moods. What is the mood that you're trying to communicate here? It really felt like Tumbleweeds was about a particular neighborhood, and it did mirror. I did have some of the stories of true life inside of it, and it felt like I was like on the sidewalk, and I was like absorbing what it was like during that time period of your life, about that neighborhood and the people there. That's the mood that I got. I got the mood of that time of the. I think it was in the 1970s. That's the mood that I got. As far as minds go for Vincetti brothers, how you got behind the eyes of all three of the brothers and all the other characters too. You got to see their inner workings. That was something that was different from Tumbleweeds to me. Tumbleweeds didn't so much have that. You had Lincoln Webb, but they were also kids, and their thoughts were not always so complex, even though when complex things happen to them. And so that's what I saw. And your comparison that the first one's like your take on the great American novel. The second one is your take on like a moralistic novel. I think that's pretty apt. A novel of minds, you're gonna have to have a lot more thought or something. Sorry, it's pretty late over here. It's hard for me to pull my thoughts together. I work like 10 hours today.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I thought it was good, because one of the things that I remember from Tumbleweeds very well is I just feel like when I think about that book, I feel like I'm just on the stoop, just watching Manny and Lincoln Webb, or I'm in the with Alyosha McCall, and I'm watching them play chess or something. There is a feeling there. I wish I could articulate this better, but I just can't. But then, yeah, the novel of minds, and of course it's 1,000+ pages of very minute details of what these characters are thinking. It seems to work for me. Yeah, I felt like it was.
So a few more questions, and I'll let you go since it's late. The book, Vincetti Brothers, opens what I call an odd form of exculpation for the readers. What did you think of that little thing?
I reread it just a couple hours ago. I thought it was very funny. It was cool. It was interesting. It was in the Vincetti Brothers. You get to Let me just pull it up real quick. I thought it was very interesting how you quoted that man, the writer who your wife was talking to. Back to it. An odd form of exculpation. That's really funny. Yes. I thought it was good. I assume you wrote it at the very end.
Actually, that was one of the first things I wrote.
Okay, that's interesting. I always imagined it was at the very end. Yeah, and you talk about how Tumbleweeds is written to be more in mood, to be literary, to the next, the great American novel. Well, I did that. Now it's to show me a book that surpasses it. It was funny. It was very witty. It really set the stage for me. I was like, oh man, I think I mentioned last time because I had read this much of Vincetti Brothers last time we talked about True Life, and I was saying how it feels like rock and roll to me. Now, after reading Norwegian in the Family, at the beginning of Norwegian in the Family, the trailers, that's actually more rock and roll. I have some comments on that later. Yeah, it's cool. It sets the scene. I'm really not sure. I'm sure other people have noticed much more interesting things. Having the man from Moo Moo Press, what's his name? That whole essay that he wrote, that preface to the work that he was publishing, it was an interesting little. It's interesting that you didn't just choose some really bad form of writing, because clearly the man's talented, and clearly the man's funny. He's kind of witty, kind of crass, but kind of witty too at the same time. I thought it was interesting, and it really was a good way to contrast what the rest of the novel was.
And a couple other things, like I said. The book's main epigraph comes right after that. Life did not consist mainly, or even largely, of facts and happenings. It consists mainly of the storm of thoughts that is forever blowing through one's head. And that's from Mark Twain's autobiography, Volume 1. Getting back to the idea of the novel of minds, did that give you any pause or thoughts, that epigraph?
Well, besides having this book as a novel of minds and having that in there, I remember I did pause on that a little bit. Life did not consist mainly and largely of facts and happenings. Yeah, to me, it just reminded me of consciousness and how we're not aware of other people's experiences, and even though we're in physical bodies and we feel things, maybe some people don't feel like this, but I do feel like that. Maybe on the outside I'm very calm, but internally there's this like ongoing monologue that just doesn't stop, and maybe that's how, looking back on our memories and stuff, that's what we remember through the perspective of our thoughts in the first place. Yeah, it did make me pause.
So we mentioned Moby Dick. That starts off with "Call Me Ishmael," one of the most famous novel openings ever. This book starts off with a sentence that's parenthetical and apart from the rest of it. It's that Paulie Maravelli is dead, and then it explains a bit of it. Did that, and Paulie Maravelli himself is referenced in the book, but he doesn't really make any major appearance. We don't really get, and in my whole corpus, Paulie Maravelli is one of the dominant characters of A Norwegian in the Family, as you've probably seen already if you read a couple hundred pages. But we don't get him here. So what did you think of the opening line, and then the fact that we don't really get much of Paulie just secondhand?
I thought, sorry, my dog. I thought it was very good. I remember the first thing I saw Paulie Maravelli was dead. I remember in Tumbleweeds, because he was in Tumbleweeds briefly, and he died. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that's the first thing I remember. So that was the first. I was like, all right, so this book is going to begin around his funeral. That's when he died. And then, yeah, you didn't get too much into him, but that was my reference point for the rest of it. It begins with a dead mobster. A dead mobster. That's where it begins. And so I realized that, okay, it's going to have something to do with this.
Well, within, and as you read further on into Norwegian in the Family, sort of the Schneider fictive cosmos, the death of Paulie Maravelli is sort of ground zero. Everything in that universe sort of leads up to his death. Everything then comes from that death to a certain degree. And the final thing I wanted to just talk about, since we're the first line, I just want to read briefly the closing of the book. The lie, obviously, was in my usage of the auxiliary verb may in the final sentence, rather than simply stating I have been there. Because what I do is I recapitulate the end of Tumbleweeds here at the end of this book, and then I state, so again, the lie obviously was my usage of the auxiliary verb may in the final sentence, rather than simply stating I have been them. For Dan Schneider is not my pseudonym, but my name. Manny Cole is my pseudonym. Well, not really. He is my creation only. Dan Schneider is me. I am him. This was not me. What did you think of that?
Well, I know you probably get a lot of questions about these pseudonyms that you use for yourself. I mean, it's cool. I really love the last line. This was not me. When I read it, I was on Thursday when I finished this. I was pretty floored by the last paragraph right there. Um, I think what most people are going to think of when they see this is like, why are you using, why put yourself in the book? I guess why do that? What was the part in the novel? What was its place in the novel? And at the very beginning, you have that, which I laughed out loud when he said Manny Cole speaking, and he's like, some of you think that the man's cover, name of the man on this book, Dan Schneider, is really me. Well, no, that's my pseudonym. And there's another motherfucker, cocksucking, whatever. I think that's like a direct quote. Another sucking, motherfucking cocksucking, whoever, who's claiming to be Dan Schneider. That guy's whatever, like that. And then you end it with this, where it's like, oh no, it was me the whole time. Of course, we know that. I guess. I thought it was interesting. I think it's another way to weave into like the story, to bring yourself but not into yourself. It reminds me of True Life too, where not everything you remember is actually accurate. So I guess it gives you a platform to actually change things around and be artistic.
The reason I asked is because I tried to tie it in with the beginning quote from Mark Twain, and that he ends Huckleberry Finn with I'm going out westward. I've been there before or something. So I wanted to have that same kind, not the exact same sentiment, but the sentiment that that this person, whoever it is, Dan or Manny or whoever, has moved on from here. This is not me. Doesn't mean that I'm not the person who wrote the book. It could also mean that this is not me any longer, meaning I'm not Manny Cole. I'm not that type of person. I just wondered if you might have gotten that from that.
Now that I read it again, perhaps. I mean, yeah, I guess I could literally work on a few levels like that. But I mostly just think of Manny Cole and the Dan Schneider Manny Cole connection. That's really what I'm thinking of when I see this.
Okay. Well, unless you have any final thoughts, I want to thank you for talking with me about it. Anyone who has, there's probably half a dozen people out there who have emailed me in the last 6 months or so wanting the book. So maybe if they see this, maybe I can get their opinions about it when they hopefully get back to me. Some of them never get back to me. But I thank you also for bruiting the book. Hopefully maybe you get some of your Chinese friends over there that want to read that not all Americans are stupid assholes, and there's actually some intelligent people on this side of the Pacific. But again, thanks for reading it, and let me know. I don't know if it'll be 6 months or a year from now that you get done with A Norwegian in the Family. When you ever get done with it, we can do this again.
Yeah, that's a bit longer, isn't it? Yeah, I'm actually really excited to keep reading that one. I mean, the last thing I just want to say is that the very beginning of the Norwegian with the trailers, and then at the very end where you have the Norwegian and the family coming in like a movie trailer.
Yeah.
Maybe it's small, but I really dug that. That was cool. That was a novel way to begin it.
Yeah. Well, now that's something that, unlike the exculpation, that's something that I had in my mind. I was thinking, how am I going to end this book? Because A Norwegian in the Family is very much like a film, and I'm saying, let me end. And when I would, you can't really. The book is so great that you can't really spoil it. But I would say, don't look at the very end of the book until you get to the end. And when you get to the end with the notes, don't stop at the notes. Keep reading through the notes at the end of the book, because then, if you notice, there's A Norwegian in the Family by Dan Schneider, and then there's The Norwegian in the Family by Manny Cole. So The Norwegian is a book within the book of A Norwegian in the Family. And read it till literally go to the very last page of the Word document. That's the only thing I'm going to say then.